Guys, Pretzelman 945 here. Welcome back to another video. In today's video, I am going to be um talking about my experience rewatching every Star Wars movie. Um, So first off, happy late May the 4th. I know I didn't make a direct video on the day, but this is what it is. This is like the thing I decided to do this year was um rewatch all nine main Star Wars movies. I did not do Solo or Rogue One because I wasn't really feeling like it, and to be honest, I don't really think my opinions would change very much on either of those films. Um, my opinions have changed quite drastically on several of these films, though, which made it interesting, for sure to do this. So what I'm gonna do in this video is I'm gonna go through the films in one to nine in order, talk about my thoughts of them. At the end, I will do my updated ranking of the Star Wars movies. And that one will include Solo and Rogue One, even though I didn't talk about them in this video. Um, so starting off with The Phantom Menace, this is not a movie that I've changed my opinion on. In my opinion, The Phantom Menace is still the most aggressively mid movie I have ever seen in my life. Um, there are several things that I really enjoy about it, like the entire Duel of the Fates fight at the end is really, really cool. And I personally, I will always defend the pod racing scenes because I think that they are so well filmed and they just look awesome no matter what age you are. Although obviously the biggest negative in this movie is the fact that Jar Jar Binks is just a horrible character. He is not funny. Um, and he is just worthless. He does not serve anything to the plot, and he is really annoying. Um, and also my other biggest issue with this movie is, um, and this is a much bigger problem that I will discuss when we get to Attack of the Clones in a moment. But like, this movie is supposed to be the kind of start to Anakin and Padme's relationship, and from the not like romantically, of course, but just kind of like getting the two acquainted for where they eventually fall in love in Attack of the Clones. Um, and this movie already does not start that off on a good precedent because their relationship is extremely inconsistent from scene to scene, and this is a theme throughout the entirety of the prequel trilogy. But like kind of weirdly transitions from like Padme being kind of rational as the queen and not really believing that Anakin can do this. That Anakin can like miraculously win a pod race, to kind of save their own fortunes and such. And then, um, and then like she's like, oh yay, I always knew you could do it. And then, like when they're on the ship, it's like they're made. It's made to seem like they actually deeply cared for each other, even though they haven't known each other that long, and it's just very, very strange. And this is something I'll talk on a lot more later, but um, I should mention, I don't like that Anakin was a kid. I don't. I think that I agree with the mass perspective on this that I think he should have been a young adult at least. I think it would have made a lot more sense overall to the movie. That being said, I did not mind Qui-Gon. I don't think Qui-Gon's inclusion was a bad film. I think Liam Neeson is an extremely entertaining actor, and I think it's very cool to see him in a Star Wars role. I think he does it very, very well. That being said, um, Anakin needs more time with Obi-Wan. And like I said, this is something I'm going to talk on a lot more in Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith. But I think that like I don't think the whole issue of their relationship across the prequel trilogy was solely caused by the fact that they didn't have enough time together nor do I even think it was like one of the biggest causes for it. But I do think it is a supporting factor in why Anakin and Obi-Wan's relationship was not particularly believable. And I think that I don't mind Qui-Gon in the movie. I think that I think that you could fix this Anakin Obi-Wan problem and still have Qui-Gon in the movie perfectly okay. That being said, speaking of Qui-Gon, I like the midi-chlorian explanation. I do. Now, is this mostly based on the fact of bias that Darth Plagueis is one of my favorite books of all time and that has an amazing continuation on the lore about midichlorians? Yes, yes, it is. That's exactly what that is. But I don't care because it's a peak book and everyone should read it if you are even the least bit interested in any bit of Star Wars lore beyond the movies because it does in my opinion, it makes all the lore and situation around the Phantom Menace so much better. So go read that book. Um, but besides that, yeah, the idea that Anakin was conceived by the Force is a little ridiculous. I will not deny that. But I do like the midi-chlorian explanation, and I think it adds some cool lore to the Force without really taking away the kind of mysterious aspect that it possesses. Um, so that's Phantom Menace, still extremely aggressively mid, and Attack of the Clones if you're familiar with my channel, I've lauded this movie in the past as one of the worst movies ever made. And I can confidently say that that still stands. I don't know if it was like quite enough to like rise in the rankings of my least favorite movies because to be honest, I have not updated that sort of ranking in a long time. But I somehow, and I did not think this was possible, but I somehow found even more dislike about this movie than before. I did not think that was possible, and yet this movie is so fucking awful that it happened. So to kind of talk about my bigger points, things I didn't like about the movie before that have kind of stayed the same. For kind of like a summary of what I've talked about before, um, Obi-Wan not being able to find a planet is extremely fucking stupid, and it pisses me off every single time. Um, the fact that a youngling had to point out that someone removed the planet from the archives and the fact that Jocasta knew was like if it is not in our archives and it doesn't exist like it's like the vainest stupidest shit ever and it's so it makes me so mad it really does it's so stupid. It was such a stupid decision. Um, and there are the other things, such as the fact that the CGI is very, very bad and has not aged very well at all, and a lot of scenes, especially the Joy Factory scene, look like a total mess, where it's kind of hard to tell what's going on in a lot of times. Um, And then obviously the romance is fucking terrible. Um, the dialogue is just atrocious. It is like, honestly, I feel confident in saying it is the most atrocious dialogue ever put to screen. Um, like every single line feels so thick and forced and just they have no chemistry at all, and it just oh, um. But one of the newer things I found that I disliked about this movie actually comes from kind of digging into those digging into Anakin and Padme a little bit. So I want to start with Anakin because it's the easier thing to talk about. But like, holy shit, Anakin is a fucking creep. Like, it is absolutely diabolical the kind of things that he does to Padme. Like, he's like touching her skin and making creepy smiles and like making weird, like lustful expression and the way that he's talking to her is like so seductive. It's just it's incredibly like predatory and it's just not no. It's just awful. It's just awful. It's so bad. It's so bad. Um and on top of that, despite the fact that Padme repeatedly expresses not having romantic interest in Anakin until at the end of the movie where she just randomly seems to say like, "Oh, I love you. Let's get married." Blah blah blah. Besides that, which is just kind of like bullshit in its own right, it's just bad writing. The thing that just honestly, this is the thing that was just really fucking funny because I watched a YouTube video that had made this point before, and I'm rewatching Attack of the Clones. It was just something that I literally could not unsee. Um, and I can't stop thinking about it now because even though Padme says that she is not romantically interested in Anakin. In every single kind of romantic scene that they have, he is wearing the most like close cut, bloody, like the most skin exposed possible outfits. And it's just hilarious to see that. Because it's like it feels like it's like are you romantically interested or are you not because you're wearing these ridiculous outfits that are clearly meant to turn on this incredibly horny teenager who's already giving you very weird look um and by far my biggest new issue with this movie on rewatching it is the fact that I absolutely hate Padme in this movie. Um, the writing in this movie is so bad that the character can never seem to stay the same in one particular scene. Now, what I'm referring to with this is there are some scenes where she seems like a very rational politician who recognizes that her and Anakin being romantically involved is not realistic and it's a very bad idea. Then there are other scenes like where they're playing in the grass, which reminds me of like a Disney Channel teen romance movie. And then there are other scenes where Padme seems to be like this weird, comforting mother type. Like the scene where Anakin talks about killing the Sand People, which, despite the fact that Hayden Christensen, in my opinion, especially in this movie in particular, is a terrible actor, this one scene, I will admit, it's a good scene. Like, you know, I can see the ideas that were there in terms of influencing Anakin's fall to the dark side slightly, like kind of slowly putting him on that path. However, the entire scene is ruined. Like, the reason why it stops being a good scene is because Padme is so awfully written in the scene. Like, he is like he just does nothing in the scene. He just listens to Anakin vent. And there isn't any kind of reaction from her, which is so frustrating. It's like I want to see some kind of a reaction. I want to see her be horrified. I want to see her comfort Anakin because of the extreme feelings that he's going through in that scene. But she does none of that. She just kind of sits there and awkwardly listens to it and doesn't really do anything. And it's just extremely frustrating and it's horrible writing. Padme was just a horrible character in this movie. Like, I would dare say the worst written character in the entire movie. And there was so much missed potential as well because the one of the very few good things about this movie is Christopher Lee's performance as Count Dooku because Christopher Lee is Christopher Lee and he does a fantastic job as Count Dooku. That performance is amazing. But there's too little of him. He's on screen for maybe 15 minutes of the movie and 5 minutes in Revenge of the Sith. Give me more good Christopher Lee Count Dooku stuff. He's supposed to be the main villain of this movie, but he's barely on screen for the whole movie. And I just think that was an incredible wasted opportunity considering Christopher Lee's absolutely immense acting talents and how good of a performance he does as Count Dooku. Um, and also just a little thing. Okay, yeah, sure, they get the clones and whatnot, but how the fuck do they get all the ship and the military equipment and the fucking walkers and the tanks and such. Like that is offered that is given literally zero fucking explanation and as I'll get to with Rise of Skywalker, people complaining about the final order and Palpatine is a very valid complaint, but I feel like I never hear that same complaint being um rallied toward what I feel like is just as much of a completely nonsensical um choice here that just has no explanation whatsoever and it's given no explanation as to how the clones got all these ships and all of this machinery and guns and fucking tanks and walkers to use and such. Um Now that's everything with the Attack of the Clones. That was pretty long. We're already at a 20-minute video here, so it can be a very long video. So please settle in, get comfortable. Unless you don't want to watch anymore. Um, Now moving on to Revenge of the Sith. I really enjoyed this movie, but it had a lot more problems than I remembered, and it's way out of my top 20 movies of all time. That's an easy thing to say. And um and it's definitely gone down several places in my Star Wars movie ranking. I think it might be the one that has changed the most amount of spots, I would say. Um but yeah, to get into this movie, um honestly, I think that this is an immediate boon over Attack of the Clones in so many ways. Because you get a lot more of Anakin and Obi-Wan's relationship, and this is also a negative I have, and I'm going to talk about this a lot more when we get to the point. But the scenes that we get with them, where they're like very cordial, maybe that's the wrong word, but they have a great camaraderie. Um, that's good stuff. I like that. Um, all the lightsaber fights in this movie are amazing. Hayden Christensen, in my opinion, um, he has some cringy tendencies, but I think he learned a lot from playing Anakin the first time, and I think that he does a significantly better job this time around. Um, um, what else was I gonna say? I think Grievous is very entertaining, and every single scene that has been memeified to death, I very much enjoyed. And I won't lie, a great reason I enjoy this movie is because of the memes. I'll be completely honest about that. That is a significant contribution to a lot of my enjoyment for this movie. And I will say, um, I think that I think that the best overall quality of the prequels by far is Ian McDiarmid's performance as Palpatine, and I truly believe it is one of, if not the absolute greatest performances in all of cinema. Um, because you're combining that with Return of the Jedi, but like in the prequels, um, it's not better than Return of the Jedi, but like in the prequels, he just does such an excellent job. And everything about like the kind of ideas that were there to um turn Anakin to the dark side. I was behind the whole idea of it, and I think the way that Palpatine manipulates him, like the opera scene, is absolutely incredible. Um, it's so peak. It is such a fantastic scene in terms of Anakin, like moving a lot further toward the dark side. Um, And I think Palpatine as a villain in this movie is absolutely legendary. Now, where my biggest issue by far with this movie comes is, say it with me, the execution. Um, because while I said that I love all the ideas and the stuff about the Clone Wars, the biggest issue is it happens way too fast. Everything happens way too fast. Anakin's fall to the dark side feels incredibly rushed, and as such, all the buildup and believable ideas and causes for it suddenly feel a lot less realistic because of the fact that it happens so fast that it does not feel believable. It is literally like an instant fucking light switch that he turns to the dark side. Like he kills Mace Windu and he immediately pledges his loyalty to Palpatine and becomes his apprentice. Like it just doesn't work. It does not. And for that matter, it's not just Anakin falling to the dark side, but also like the thing with Order 66 happening, it just feels like it happens like that. Now, granted, the Order 66 thing, I can excuse a little bit more because of the fact that it's a little bit more believable that the clones would have had some kind of programming like that once you know what Palpatine's plans are. Um, However, that doesn't change the fact that, in my opinion, it still happened way, way too quickly, and as such, the the emotional weight of what is supposed to be a very tragic scene is lost, and and I mean, this is also primarily caused by the fact that some of the Jedi in this movie just die in the most unconvincing and honestly laughably stupid ways possible. And what I'm mainly referring to with that is the example of Ayla Secura, who just sees clones around her and then just falls to the ground and gets shot in the back like 1,000 times, and it's honestly just laughably ridiculous that a Jedi Master would die like that. The other cases are a little more believable, like Kiadi Mundi being caught off guard, and Plo Koon um, being shot down. Those make more sense, but it's mainly that Ayla Secure example that is just absolutely ridiculous and just takes any and all tension out of the scene instantly. And as a result of this, like light switch of a change, the tone completely like is ruptured, and it just is not a smooth transition at all. Um, and granted, I would not change anything about the Clone Wars TV show's existence, but like part of me almost wishes, and this is where I'm going to get into the Anakin Obi-Wan thing, but like part of me also wishes that there was 10 movies, and the prequels were actually a quadrilogy, and one of the movies was like exclusively about the doings of the Clone Wars. Because I feel like in that sense, because the Clone Wars TV show wasn't made till several years after Revenge of the Sith came out, I feel like if we had that movie in between Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith, then we would have had this much better idea of how things transitioned and how Anakin fell to the dark side. And that's why the Clone Wars show is my favorite piece of Star Wars media overall, even better than Empire Strikes Back. Um, Bit of a spoiler for the ranking, but like, come on. Huh, but like, I just there was a lot of potential there, and it was just squandered, and it's just sad. Um, but yeah, that is all of the prequels, and we've already been going for 30 minutes. Um, so now into the original trilogy, which honestly have only gone up in appreciation for me as I rewatched all these movies. A New Hope was just absolutely fantastic. It's just a really simple story, but I love Luke's introduction as a character. Obi-Wan is fantastic. I have a bigger appreciation for Han Solo as a character than I used to. Um and yeah, I really, really enjoyed this movie. The entire thing was just a very, very fun time, and it was just a great reminder of what I loved about Star Wars growing up, like when I first watched it. because I watched A New Hope for the first time when I was 7 years old. So I've been a Star Wars fan for a very, very long time. Um, and then coming to Empire Strikes Back, this movie was just still peak. Peak in every level, honestly. The scene in the cave is still one of my favorite scenes in all of Star Wars, and Yoda is just the fucking goat. Um, and honestly, this movie improved in an aspect that I didn't think it would improve because when I watched it before, I wasn't the biggest fan of the way that Han and Leia's romance kind of seemed to spring up. However, this time around, I actually appreciated it a lot more. I really, really like their chemistry, and I honestly do think it feels very natural to me the way that their relationship builds up. Does it feel a little bit fast? Yes, and I think that was my biggest issue with why I didn't like it that much before. But this time around, I have a much bigger appreciation for it, and I actually quite like it. Um, Honestly, not that much more to say on Empire Strikes Back because it's so peak. um and uh Return of the Jedi honestly got even better in my eyes because I just remembered how much I love all the stuff with Luke, Vader, and the Emperor. Best parts of the movie, and to be honest, in my mind, it has only gotten better over time. And I only liked it even more when I rewatched it. I quite enjoy the scenes in Jabba's palace. I think that they are just a fun time. I think it's fun seeing them, rescue Han and get control of Jabba's whole thing. And I think it's very I like it a lot. Um I really love like Luke as a character, and I think that his honestly that was the thing with Empire Strikes Back as well. When I was rewatching these movies, like I already loved Luke before, but I have a much bigger appreciation for him as a protagonist, especially in Empire Strikes Back. And that kind of continues into Return of the Jedi, where you can clearly tell that he has learned a lot, and in my opinion, the really great thing about him is the fact that he's very much this underdog hero compared to the traditional idea of the hero's journey. I feel like he's much more of an underdog because of the fact that his ability to resist the dark side, I feel, was underestimated by Obi-Wan and Yoda. Um, and yet he has plenty of moments which feel so believable, especially in Return of the Jedi, where he kind of falters between, but ultimately maintains his resolve to being a Jedi, and it's just fantastic. Um, and when I was talking about how Han and Leia's relationship feels more natural, I think a big reason for that is because of their just amazing chemistry in Return of the Jedi. Um, I think that they have a lot of amazing moments together, where they actually like genuinely like for each other and are there for each other. Um, and then like, Han showing his amazing arc, like in that one scene where he's about to like walk off about like asking about like does Leia love Luke and stuff like that. While they're kind of like away from the Ewok party. Like the fact that he goes back and holds Leia, amazing scene, and I think that really shows the amazing development that Han Solo has in becoming more emotionally available. Um, And I also like Leia a lot more in Return of the Jedi. I like her in A New Hope and Empire Strikes Back, but I think she is at her best in Return of the Jedi because I think that she is at her most realistic, and I think that the way her character is portrayed is just really nice. Um, now speaking of the Ewoks, I don't hate them. I really don't. I think that they're kind of fun. Now, is some of the stuff that the Ewoks do a good bit ridiculous? Yes, it is. It's very goofy and it's not like it does kind of take out of the realism of the I guess seriousness it does kind of it is kind of like an extreme contrast with what was happening with um like Luke and the Emperor on the Death Star versus like what was happening on Endor. However, um I really don't hate it because in a certain sense I feel like it kind of I feel like it kind of like that's very explained. I feel like it kind of is a good way to reflect the idea of rebellion in the movie. And I think that it is a it's hard how do you explain? I think that the Ewoks are a good like tonal reflection of the kind of more hopeful aspect that the movie is trying to portray the with the Ewok being so you know ridiculous and goofy and such. Um so in that sense I think that they're not that bad. Sue me. Um But yeah, overall, I really love Return of the Jedi a lot, like a lot more than I had previously. And overall, the original trilogy was just amazing, just incredibly consistent. It's just truly the absolute best of Star Wars, and it's not even close, in my opinion. Um, that was probably my biggest takeaway of doing this entire thing. Um, Now Force Awakens, I'm not going to say too much on it. I just think it's a good, solid movie that set up some cool ideas for where the sequel trilogy could have potentially gone. Um, I'm going to say something, and I don't know if it's a hot take or not, but I think Finn should have been the main character of the sequel trilogy. Because as I'll get to when we talk about Rise of Skywalker, there was clearly some idea in the mess of where they had no real plan. There was clearly some idea in there for Finn to be force sensitive. At least that's what it seems to me, unless it was just kind of randomly put in there as a thing for that movie. But like I'm kind of convinced that that was at least an idea that existed somewhere in the mess that is the sequel trilogy at some point. Um, and I think that he should have been the main character of the trilogy. I think it would have made a lot more cohesive sense. And but to that end, I don't hate the idea that they were going for with Ray, where she was kind of this nobody character, and I think that it's an interesting idea. Although the Mary Sue I label is very, very hard to avoid on Ray when she can do things like seemingly do a Jedi mind trick without ever learning it. And She's really, really powerful in the Force for a unexplained reason, and she's a really good pilot for an unexplained reason. Um, that being said, I think the things that this movie does really good, and the ideas it introduces, such as Snoke and the Kylo Ren Han Solo bits, are absolutely fantastic. And the best scene in of this movie by far is the death of Han Solo. Um, um, I will say I really don't like Maz Kanata's character. I think that she is annoying and she is extremely overly peachy. And this is a problem I've always had with the sequels. I don't like her at all. Um, so it's a good thing that she's not in the next movie, The Last Jedi. Now, The Last Jedi was a very interesting case for me because I have lauded this movie with praise in the past. And it was in my top 20 movies. It is not anymore, similar to Revenge of the Sith, where it had more problems this time around than I've ever had with it before. Um, but to that end, I still greatly enjoyed this movie. And I'm going to talk about the positives first. I think that everything in the sequel trilogy, not just The Last Jedi, everything in the sequel trilogy, but that was introduced in The Last Jedi, everything surrounding Rey and Kylo being a dyad in the Force and that whole concept is amazing. I love it. Um, that might be my singular favorite aspect across all the sequels because even in spite of the bad parts that the sequels have, which are really bad, as we're going to, as we're not bad, they're pretty freaking bad, as we're going to get to. Um, that one idea was consistently the best part of all the sequels, and I think everything about it in The Last Jedi is fantastic. Um, now the other thing, and my favorite thing about this movie by far, is Luke's character arc. I think everything you do with it is absolutely brilliant. And honestly, the biggest issue that Luke's character arc has isn't even really a fault of his own character. It's the fault of the fact of the disastrous decision to kill off Snoke. I know I'm far from the first person to say that it's a bad decision, but I've come into agreement with people that say it's the worst thing about the Last Jedi, and it's not the worst thing about the Last Jedi because Canto Bight exists, but um, it was a very baffling decision, which, considering it was only done to subvert expectations, I think it was honestly the single thing that probably ruined the sequels the most because Snoke had so much potential as a villain, and he had so many great scenes building up to this. Um, and the idea that he was the one who reads the minds of them was really interesting to me. But he just ended up being killed off for no particular reason, which is just it was not good. And going back to the Luke thing, I think that Luke's character arc, I think the only issue I have with it is it kind of seems like he flips a switch against Ben too fast. Like he becomes seclusive too fast, in my opinion. This is to the extreme of which the tonal change was the tonal change brought rupturing to everything. This is hell no. This is like exponentially less of a like disastrous tonal change, which like flips everything compared to Revenge of the Sith. But I feel like if we had more time with, like, if we had time to explore how Snoke turned Ren to the dark side, then I think that would have not only greatly added to Snoke and Kylo Ren's characters, also Luke's character arc as well, because we would have gotten to see like his changing feelings toward finding out the darkness within Kylo Ren. Um, so I think let's not go over the other bits. Canto Bite's obviously shit. I honestly I skipped it this time around, which I haven't done before, but it's not a good idea, and Kelly Marie Tran absolutely deserves zero hate for doing what she was paid to do, being an actor. That being said, the entire idea behind Rose's character was just awful. Rose's character, in my opinion, should never have existed in the first place because it was just an incredibly unnecessary inclusion in this movie, and all it did was completely ruin Finn's character because he was about to have that incredibly amazing moment, but just for the sake of subverting expectations, he does not end up getting to do that, and it was very frustrating, I have to say. That is like the second biggest thing besides the death of Snoke that I feel like really ruined the potential of the sequel trilogy. Um, now, going into the final movie, The Rise of Skywalker. During the past, I used to think that Rise of Skywalker was just a very mid movie. My opinion has definitely soured on it. And I know because I just finished rewatching it this afternoon. Um, it was not a good movie. I think it is a bad movie that has some fantastic individual scenes. That's how I would summarize The Rise of Skywalker because in terms of those scenes that I think are really good, I will defend. I think that the redemption of Ben Solo is brilliant. Um, I think that entire scene, and I don't even want to estimate how much thumbs of millions they paid for Han Solo for Harrison Ford to make one final appearance in this movie for that scene. But it was so worth it because that scene is brilliant. Um, and call me a sucker for all the fan service traps that they try to lay in this movie, but I think that Luke lifting the X-wing is just such a fantastic scene because it is such a amazing callback to when Yoda did it in Empire Strikes Back. Um and also, I think the Voices of Jedi Pass is a very very cool scene, and I think that idea is cool. Now, as for all the other bad scenes, every single attempt at quips and humor in this movie are just bad. It's like fringy Marvel levels of awful, and it was just there were so many moments that just made me facepalm. And speaking of things that made me facepalm, and the idea that I mentioned earlier that they had about making Finn force sensitive, everything about him in this movie is just god awful. Like I don't even remember the character's name, but like Jayla, I think, or whatever her name was. Um, the kind of weird instant connection that they seem to make with each other, even though they are just former stormtroopers, is completely ridiculous in my opinion. Mm. And, and I don't know, their whole thing together is just weird. And Finn suddenly seeming like he has knowledge of the Force and being Force sensitive is just ridiculous, and I don't like it. His character is just so ruined, and then like the weird kind of backstory they try and give Poe is just weird and it doesn't pan out. All the like additional characters they're introduced in this movie are just not very good. Like it's really frustrating the fact that like this Neo droid suddenly very conveniently has all this information about Exegol. Um, and then, like, of course, there's the whole thing about Palpatine returning. Now, one thing I will say is that Ian McDiarmid once again gives an absolutely just amazing performance as Palpatine. Um, I think that that is honestly probably the best thing about the whole movie. Um, besides the whole diet and the force stuff being really good, which I've said is I think the best thing about the whole sequel trilogy as a whole is that idea. I think that his performance was just absolutely fantastic, even in spite of the fact that the entire idea of Palpatine returning is completely ridiculous and it doesn't make any sense. And what makes much less sense, even on like I complained about like, in Attack of the Clones earlier how like um it doesn't make any sense how the clones got all those walkers and um start and like cruisers and all that stuff. Like stuff that would make them an entire military beyond just the troops themselves. Well, despite the fact that that is a laughably ridiculous part of Attack of the Clones, um, it's like exponentially worse in The Rise of Skywalker because it is this humongous fleet of Star Destroyers, each of which has planet-killing technology like only the Death Star had, but it's on every one of the Star Destroyers in this giant fleet. Um, and they suddenly seem to have all of these officials, and they have their own like stormtroopers and like color aesthetic, which looks really similar to the First Order, but it's like not. It's weird and um and then like the fact that they are relying solely on one navigation tower and then like when that's deactivated it's only transferred to one other ship to guide the whole freaking fleet out is just absolutely ridiculous and it's very dumb. Just no thought given to what to any of that whatsoever, and um, every single moment in this movie that feels like it was going for being payoff with something did not work because it wasn't paid off in any way. I feel like, and just yeah, this movie was not good. It really was not good at all. Um, and it's significantly lower than my own rankings. Now, speaking of rankings, to get to my updated ranking of the Star Wars movies, in dead last, not even close, it's Attack of the Clones. Dead last, and that will never change. Um, in in 10th position is The Rise of Skywalker because I think it is a bad movie that is saved by not saved. That is um that has a few very good scenes. And then after that, I would say The Phantom Menace because I think that that movie is just so aggressively mid. Um, and then I would say Solo. Because I think that movie is just very average, but it does have some good ideas in there. It just doesn't ever really go for anything crazy, I feel. And then after Solo, I would say that Force Awakens is the next movie because I think it's just a good, solid movie. And then I would say Rogue One, which I think has an excellent third act, and I think is honestly, for the most part, a really good movie, but has some pretty weak character writing, especially. in the beginning and middle of the movies, which make it hard to connect with a lot of the characters by the end of the movie, considering they all die. Um, and and then after that, this might seem blasphemous to a lot of people, but I would put Revenge of the Sith above Rogue One because I enjoy it more. And to that end, I would put The Last Jedi above Revenge of the Sith. And that is like the final place that it ends up. Which is fourth place on this list. Um, and um and then a significant jump up, I basically have in my top three, I have the original three movies. In third place, I have A New Hope. In second place, I have Return of the Jedi, and in first place, I have Empire Strikes Back. And yeah, that is my updated Star Wars ranking. Now one final point that I did want to conclude with, I will try to make it brief because this video is uh, almost an hour long at this point. But something that I just really want to emphasize, doing this again, like rewatching all these movies, especially several of which I haven't watched, I haven't rewatched in several years. It was a very, very nice experience because I think that I think that it just kind of reaffirmed my love for Star Wars in a lot of ways. And over my 20 years of existence on this earth, my opinions on Star Wars, on all aspects of the movies, have changed a lot. Um, from me liking the original trilogy best when I was a little kid and I was first getting into Star Wars to like when I was like a preteen to teenagerhood where prequels were my favorite, and then for a long time where I um The Last Jedi and Rise of Skywalker quite high for a few years. Um my opinion has changed very drastically over the many years that I've been a Star Wars fan on this earth, but it does not change the fact that I am still deeply, deeply in love with Star Wars, and it means a lot to me. It is my second favorite work of fiction behind Attack on Titan, and before I watched Attack on Titan, it was my number one. Uh, Piece of fiction of all time. And this overall, I was really reminded of um, no matter how many years I uh, live until I die, um, and no matter how many times my opinions continue to change after this video and my ranking of these movies may change, I will still always love Star Wars so much. Um, and yeah, that's gonna do it for this video. Hopefully you enjoy it. It's a very long video, but I'm quite happy with how I managed to give out my thoughts in this video. And yeah, uh, hopefully you enjoyed. Thank you very, very much for watching. Be late. May the fourth be with you, and I will see you all later. Bye bye.